The sun of New Eden was setting behind the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded Elena Vasquez of Earth's summers she would never see again. She stood at the window of her small home, watching her daughter Maya play in the garden below, and she felt that familiar warmth in her chest that only a mother could understand. Maya was 7 years old now, with her father's dark curly hair and her mother's stubborn spirit. And she was the reason Elena had traveled 40 light years from Earth to this frontier world. New Eden was supposed to be a paradise, a fresh start for humanity among the stars. But lately the paradise had begun to show its cracks. The colony existed under the rules of the Galactic Concord, a coalition of 42 alien species that had welcomed humanity into their fold just over a century ago. And humanity was still considered a minor species in their eyes. They saw humans as children themselves, short-lived creatures who had barely learned to walk among the stars. And they treated Earth's colonies with a mix of curiosity and condescension. Elena did not mind this so much, for she was a xenobiologist who had dedicated her life to understanding alien species. And she knew that respect had to be earned over time. What she did mind was the Vreth. The Vreth Dominion was a reptilian species that had been part of the Concord for over 2,000 years. And they had built their power on territorial expansion and resource extraction. They were cold in every sense of the word, with scales that shimmered like oil on water and eyes that held no warmth. And they had been pushing their claims on New Eden for months now. "Mama, look what I found." Maya's voice cut through Elena's thoughts like sunshine through clouds, and she turned to see her daughter running up the stairs with something cupped in her small hands. "What is it, my love?" Elena asked, kneeling down to her daughter's level. Maya opened her hands to reveal a small creature that looked like a cross between a butterfly and a flower, its wings pulsing with soft bioluminescence. "It is beautiful," Elena said, and she meant it. For even after years of studying alien life, she still found wonder in every new discovery. "Can I keep it?" Maya asked with those big, hopeful eyes that made Elena's heart melt every single time. "We should let it go back to its family," Elena said gently. "But we can watch it for a little while first." They sat together on the porch as the sun finished its descent, mother and daughter marveling at the small miracle in Maya's hands. And for a moment, everything felt perfect. But perfection on New Eden was always temporary. The next morning brought news that made Elena's blood run cold, as Vreth patrol ships had been spotted entering the human residential sector without authorization. Governor Chun called an emergency meeting at the Colonial Administration building, and Elena left Maya with her neighbor Mrs. Park, promising to be back before lunch. The Vreth claimed they are conducting routine security sweeps, Governor Chun announced to the gathered colonists, his face tight with controlled anger. "But we all know what they are really doing. They are testing us," said Marcus Webb, the colony's head of security, a former Terran Marine who had seen action on 3 different worlds. "They want to see how far they can push before we push back." Elena raised her hand to speak, and the governor nodded in her direction. "I have been studying Vreth behavioral patterns for 15 years, she said. "And this is not random aggression. This is calculated intimidation designed to make us feel unsafe in our own homes. What do you suggest we do?" Someone asked from the back of the room. "We document everything," Elena replied. "Every incursion, every violation, every threatening gesture. We send it all back to Earth, and we let the Terran Assembly handle this through proper Concord channels." It was the sensible approach, the diplomatic approach, the approach that a scientist and a mother would naturally take. But the Vreth had no interest in diplomacy. 3 days later, they came for the children. It was a quiet afternoon when the first screams echoed through the residential sector, and Elena was walking home from the research station when she saw the Vreth landing craft descending from the sky. There were 6 of them, each carrying a squad of Vreth soldiers in combat armor. and they were heading straight for the family housing blocks. Elena ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. And she only had one thought in her mind. Maya the Vreth were already on the ground when she reached her street, and she could see them dragging children out of homes while parents screamed and fought and died. Later, the Concord would learn that this was an unauthorized raid, conducted by a rogue Vreth commander who wanted biological samples for illegal genetic experimentation. Later, the Vreth Dominion would issue formal statements of regret and claim no responsibility for the actions of these criminals. But in that moment, there was no later, there was only now. And Elena Vasquez saw a Vreth soldier pointing a weapon at her daughter. Maya was standing in the garden where she had found the butterfly creature just days ago, frozen in terror as the massive reptilian figure advanced toward her. Elena did not think. She did not calculate the odds or consider the consequences or wonder if there might be a better way. She simply threw herself between the weapon and her child. The plasma bolt hit her in the chest, and the world became white-hot pain. She fell, but somehow she managed to wrap her arms around Maya, to pull her daughter close, to shield her with the last strength she had. More shots came, but they hit Elena's back, not Maya, because Elena had become a wall of flesh and bone and love that no weapon could truly penetrate. "I love you," she whispered into Maya's hair. And those were her last words when the other colonists finally drove the raiders off with whatever weapons they could find. They found Maya still holding her mother's hand, tears streaming down her face. Alive, because Elena had refused to let her die above them. A colonial camera drone had captured everything within 6 hours. The footage reached Earth, and Earth remembered that humans had never truly been tamed. They had only been waiting. The United Terran Assembly Chambers in Geneva had seen many dark days in their 300 years of existence, but none quite like this. 800 delegates from every nation and colony of humanity sat in absolute silence as the footage played on the massive screen above them. And not a single person moved or spoke or even seemed to breathe. They watched Elena Vasquez die. They watched her throw herself in front of her daughter, watched the plasma bolts tear through her body, watched her fall and still somehow find the strength to wrap her arms around little Maya. They watched the mother become a shield. When the footage ended, Secretary General Amara Okonkwo rose from her seat, and her face was a mask of controlled fury that those who knew her had never seen before. She was a woman who had built her career on diplomacy and patience, on finding common ground between enemies and building bridges where others saw only walls. But there were some bridges that could not be built, and some enemies who did not deserve the effort. "I have received communication from the Vreth Dominion," she announced, her voice steady despite the fire burning in her eyes. "They express formal regret for this incident and offer compensation to the affected families." A murmur rippled through the chamber. But Okonkwo was not finished. They also refused to extradite the soldiers responsible, citing jurisdictional immunity under Concord law, and they deny that their government had any involvement in the raid. Admiral Constantine Ore stood up from the military section, his white uniform a stark contrast to his dark skin and silver hair. "Jurisdictional immunity," he repeated, and the words dripped with contempt. "They murder our children and hide behind legal technicalities. The Concord has provisions for such situations," Okonkwo replied, and something in her tone made the entire chamber lean forward. "There's a protocol that has been invoked only 3 times in Concord history, a mechanism designed for exactly this kind of injustice." She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over them all. "I am asking this assembly to authorize the invocation of Verdict Protocol." The reaction was immediate and electric, for everyone in that chamber knew what Verdict Protocol meant. It was the nuclear option of galactic diplomacy. a declaration that a species had the right to seek justice through any means necessary when another species refused to submit to arbitration. It meant war, or at least the credible threat of war. And it had never been invoked by a species as young and small as humanity. The Concord will never approve it, said Representative Vasquez from the European Federation. No relation to Elena despite the shared name. They see us as children playing at being a starfaring civilization. Then let us show them what kind of children we are. Okonkwo replied. The vote was unanimous 12 hours later. Secretary General Okonkwo stood before the Concord Arbiter in the Great Hall of Concord Central Station, surrounded by representatives of 42 species who looked upon humanity with varying degrees of curiosity, concern, and condescension. Arbiter Sylvain was ancient, even by the standards of their insectoid species. Their compound eyes reflecting centuries of wisdom and countless conflicts resolved. Humanity invokes verdict protocol, Sylvain said. And their translator rendered the words in a tone of genuine surprise. This is a serious matter, Secretary General. Do you understand what you are asking? I understand perfectly, Okonkwo replied. The Vreth Dominion has committed an act of violence against human civilians on a Concord-protected world, and they refuse to surrender those responsible for justice. Ambassador Yilthax of the Vreth stepped forward, his scales rippling with what might have been amusement or contempt. The Secretary General exaggerates a minor incident into a galactic crisis, he said, his voice a hissing rasp that the translator smoothed into condescending politeness. A few rogue soldiers exceeded their authority, and we have already expressed our regret. What more does humanity want? We want the soldiers who pulled the triggers, Okonkwo replied, her voice hard as diamond. We want the commanders who gave the orders. And we want a formal acknowledgement that human children are not resources to be harvested for your experiments. And if we refuse? Yilthax asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his tone now. Then you have one standard cycle to reconsider, after which we will collect them ourselves. The chamber erupted in noise, as representatives shouted and gestured and tried to make sense of what they had just heard. Yilthax laughed, a harsh sound that silenced the commotion. You threaten the Vreth Dominion? He asked, his amusement evident. Humanity has been starfaring for barely a century. You have no fleet to speak of, no military tradition worth mentioning, no understanding of how the galaxy truly works. He leaned closer, his cold reptilian eyes meeting Okonkwo's warm human ones. You are small, Secretary General, and the small do not make demands of the mighty. Okonkwo did not flinch, did not look away, did not show any sign of the fear that any sensible person would feel when threatened by a species that had ruled 1,000 worlds for 1,000 years. We shall see, she said simply. Arbiter Sylvain spoke then, and their voice carried a weight that silenced even the Vreth. The protocol is invoked, they declared. Humanity has one standard cycle to receive satisfaction, after which they are authorized to pursue their own justice within the bounds of Concord law. This is absurd, Yilthax protested, but Sylvain raised one of their many limbs in a gesture of finality. The protocol exists for a reason, Ambassador, and it applies to all species equally, even the small ones. As the chamber began to empty, Sylvain approached Okonkwo with a movement that might have been casual if such an ancient being was capable of casualness. You know they will not comply, Sylvain said quietly. The Vreth have never submitted to external pressure in their entire history. I know, Okonkwo replied, and you know that if you strike at them, they will strike back with everything they have. I know that too. Sylvain studied her for a long moment, their compound eyes unreadable. You are either very brave or very foolish, Secretary General, and I am not yet certain which. There is a third option, Okonkwo said, and for the first time a small smile crossed her face. We might simply be very, very angry. She turned to leave. But Sylvine's voice stopped her. One more thing. Secretary General, a piece of advice from one who has watched species rise and fall for longer than humanity has existed. Okonkwo waited. Do not let your anger make you into the monsters you seek to punish. We will not, Okonkwo promised. Humanity seeks justice, Arbiter. Not vengeance, but we will have justice, whatever the cost. As she walked away, Sylvine turned to face the empty chamber and spoke words that no translator would carry. You have not seen humans grieve. They whispered to no one. I wonder if the Vreth understand what they have awakened in the depths of space. Signals were already racing toward Earth at faster than light speeds. And in shipyards hidden throughout the Sol system, crews that had been waiting for years began their final preparations. The countdown had begun. Captain Desuk Mori stood on the bridge of the TDV Prometheus and watched the stars stretch into lines as the ship entered hyperspace. And he thought about his own daughter back on Earth. She was 12 years old now, studying to become a doctor like her mother. And she had no idea that her father commanded one of the most advanced warships ever built by human hands. Nobody did. The Black Fleet had been humanity's secret for over 50 years. A shadow armada constructed in hidden shipyards throughout the asteroid belt and the outer planets. And its existence was known only to a handful of people in the highest levels of government. For decades, humanity had played the role of the minor species, the newcomers who posed no threat to the established powers of the galaxy. And they had done so deliberately. They had underperformed in Concord military exercises, using ships that were generations behind their actual capabilities. And they had smiled politely when other species patted them on the head and called them promising, all while building the largest and most advanced fleet any species had ever constructed in secret. Captain, we are receiving final confirmation from Earth. Commander Sarah Chun reported from her station. Operation Verdict is authorized. Mori nodded slowly, feeling the weight of what they were about to do settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. How many ships do we have in position? He asked. 472 combat vessels, Captain, ranging from destroyer class to the 3 Titan-class siege platforms we brought out of cold storage last month. And the Vreth? Their border fleet consists of approximately 300 ships, mostly cruiser and carrier class. They've been reinforcing since the Concord session, but they still do not have visual confirmation of our fleet. This was because the Black Fleet did not exist on visual sensors, or thermal sensors, or any other detection method the Vreth had ever developed. Human stealth technology was not just advanced, it was impossible by the known laws of physics, at least as other species understood them. But humans had always been good at finding loopholes in the laws of the universe. The Vreth High Commander has issued a statement, the communications officer announced. He says that humanity's deadline is meaningless and that any aggressive action will be met with overwhelming force. Does he now? Mori murmured. And there was something cold in his voice that made his crew straighten in their seats. The countdown clock on the main display showed 6 hours, remaining until the deadline expired. And the bridge crew worked in focused silence as they prepared for what was coming. Mori used the time to walk through his ship, speaking with crew members and making sure everyone understood what they were fighting for. He found Ensign Park in the torpedo bay, loading antimatter warheads into the launch tubes with hands that trembled slightly. Nervous? Mori asked. Yes, sir, Park admitted. I joined the fleet because I wanted to protect people. And now we are about to start a war. We are not starting anything, Mori replied gently. They started it when they killed Elena Vasquez. We are simply finishing it. But sir, the Vreth are one of the most powerful species in the Concord. Their fleet has been fighting wars for 2,000 years. And we have never fought anyone, Mori smiled. And it was not a kind smile, Ensign. Do you know what the Concord species find most confusing about humanity? No, sir. They cannot understand why we have so many words for war, so many strategies and tactics and philosophies of combat. They think we are a peaceful species because we have not fought any wars in space. He placed a hand on Park's shoulder. They do not realize that we have been fighting wars among ourselves for 10,000 years, that we have more experience with combat than almost any species in the galaxy, and that we have been very, very careful not to let anyone see what we are truly capable of, so we are not as outmatched as we seem. The Vreth are about to learn that underestimating humanity is the last mistake anyone ever makes. When the deadline expired, the Black Fleet revealed itself. 472 ships appeared on Vreth sensors simultaneously, surrounding 3 Vreth colony worlds in perfect tactical formations that left no avenue of escape. High Commander Vrethkal stared at the display in his command center and felt something he had not experienced in 200 years of military service. Genuine fear. Where did they come from? He demanded. How did they get so close without detection? We do not know, High Commander, his tactical officer admitted. Our sensors show nothing. We only know they are there because they want us to know. A communication request came through from the human fleet, and Vrethkal accepted it with hands that did not quite shake. Captain Maury's face appeared on the screen, calm and composed and utterly without mercy. High Commander, you have 1 hour to deliver the soldiers who murdered Elena Vasquez and the commanders who authorized the raid on New Eden. If you do not comply, we will begin dismantling your military infrastructure piece by piece until there is nothing left. You are bluffing, Vrethkal replied. But even he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. Humanity does not have the capability to threaten the Vreth Dominion. Perhaps you are right, Maury agreed. Perhaps this is all an elaborate deception, a trick of mirrors and light designed to make you believe something that is not true. He leaned forward, and his dark eyes were windows into something ancient and terrible. Or perhaps you have spent the last century looking at humanity and seeing only what we wanted you to see. Perhaps the peaceful species, the minor power, the children playing at starfaring was the real deception. You would not dare attack us. The Concord would never allow it. The Concord authorized verdict protocol, Maury reminded him. And even if they had not, do you really think we would let something like politics stop us from protecting our children? The hour passed in tense silence, and the Vreth did not comply. They believed, as they had always believed, that threats meant nothing without the will to follow through. And they were certain that humanity did not have that will. They were wrong. All ships, Captain Maury announced over the fleet-wide channel, his voice steady and clear. Commence operation verdict. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. Meant only for his crew, for Elena, he said, for Maya, and for every parent who has ever shielded their child from harm. The first volley of fire lit up the darkness of space like a new constellation being born. And the Vreth learned in that moment that humanity had never truly been tamed. They had only been waiting for a reason to bare their teeth. The Vreth command station burned against the darkness of space. Its once proud structure, now a twisted wreck of metal and flame. And Admiral Constantine Oray watched it die without satisfaction. There was no satisfaction in this. Only duty. 72 hours had passed since Operation Verdict began. And in that time, the galaxy had witnessed something it had never expected to see. The complete and utter humiliation of one of the Concord's founding species, the Vreth military, built over 2,000 years of conquest and expansion, had crumbled like sandcastles before a rising tide. Human weapons technology, kept deliberately inferior in every public demonstration and military exercise, had proven to be generations ahead of anything the Vreth possessed. Human tactics, born from 10,000 years of warfare against the most dangerous predator in the known Universe other humans had outmaneuvered and outfought the Vreth at every turn. Human soldiers, motivated not by conquest or resources, but by the simple fury of parents protecting their young, had proven unstoppable, and through it all, humanity had remained true to its word. Not a single civilian target had been struck. Not a single non-combatant had been harmed. Not a single act of vengeance had been committed that went beyond the bounds of what justice required. This was not slaughter, this was surgery. Admiral, we have secured the Central Command Hub, Colonel Martinez reported over the communication channel. The Vreth High Commander and his staff are in custody. Casualties? Ore asked. 12 wounded on our side. Non-critical Vreth casualties are still being counted. But we estimate around 3,000 military personnel. 3,000. Out of an army of millions, and even those had been given every opportunity to surrender before force became necessary. Concord observers who had accompanied the fleet, there were always observers when verdict protocol was invoked, that watched with something approaching awe as humanity waged the cleanest, most precise military campaign in galactic history. The galaxy is watching us, Ore had told his commanders before the operation began. They will judge us not by whether we win, but by how we win. We will show them that humans can be terrible in war and merciful in victory. And they will remember both. Now he walked through the corridors of the captured station, his boots echoing on metal floors that still trembled from the impact of human weapons. And he made his way to the detention level, where the prisoners waited. The soldiers who had killed Elena Vasquez were held in a cell at the end of the corridor, separated from the other prisoners for their own protection as much as anything else. Human soldiers were disciplined, but they were not made of stone. And the temptation to exact personal vengeance was one that Ore did not want to test. Stood before their cell and looked at them through the energy barrier. And he saw what he had expected to see. Terrified creatures who had thought themselves untouchable, now confronting the consequences of their actions. "You are Admiral Ore," one of them said, the translator rendering his hissing voice into flat human speech. "The commander of this invasion force." "This is not an invasion," Ore replied calmly. "Invasions are about conquest and territory. This is about justice." "Justice." Another soldier spat. "You destroyed our fleet. You humiliated our species before the entire Concord, and you call it justice? Your fleet tried to stop us from taking you to trial. It was a tactical obstacle, nothing more, and we removed it as gently as we could." "Gently?" The first soldier laughed bitterly. "You call that gentle?" "I call it restrained," Ore said. And there was no anger in his voice, only a kind of tired sadness. "We could have done so much worse. We could have bombarded your worlds from orbit. We could have targeted your civilian population. We could have made you feel even a fraction of the terror that little Maya Vasquez felt when she watched her mother die." He stepped closer to the barrier, but we did not. Because we are not you. We do not murder children. And we do not punish the innocent for the crimes of the guilty. The soldiers were silent now, and something had changed in their eyes. "You will be transferred to Concord custody for trial," Ore continued. "You will be given legal representation. You will be allowed to present your defense. And you will be judged by a panel of species who have no stake in the outcome. And then?" One of them asked quietly. "And then you will face whatever sentence the court decrees. Human justice is not quick, soldier, but it is thorough, and it does not forget." One of the younger soldiers, barely more than a juvenile by Vreth standards, pressed closer to the barrier. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, and there was genuine confusion in his voice. "She was just one human. We killed one woman, and you have destroyed everything we built." Ore was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of centuries of human history. "You killed a mother in front of her child," he said, "and on Earth, we have a saying. There is no fury like that of a parent whose child has been threatened. He met the young Vreth's eyes with a gaze that held no hatred, only an implacable certainty. You did not attack a colony. Soldier, you attacked a family, and when you attack one human family, you attack all 8 billion of us. The Vreth said nothing. I want you to understand something, Oray continued. We did not do this because we hate you. We did this because we love our children, and we will never, ever allow anyone to harm them without consequence. He turned to leave, then paused. The galaxy will remember what happened here. And perhaps the next species that thinks about hurting human children will remember too. Perhaps that is the only good that can come from all this death and destruction. As he walked away, the young Vreth soldier sank to his knees and wept. And whether it was from fear or shame or some emotion that had no name in any language, Oray did not know. He only knew that justice had been served, and that was enough. Hours later, the Vreth government transmitted its unconditional surrender. All terms were accepted without modification. The soldiers would be extradited, the commanders would be arrested, and a formal acknowledgement would be broadcast across the entire Concord, admitting that the raid on New Eden had been an act of state-sponsored terror. The war was over, but the consequences were only beginning. On Earth, on New Eden, on every human world scattered across the stars, people celebrated with tears and laughter and the fierce pride of a species that had finally shown the galaxy what it truly meant to be human. And in a small house in Vancouver, where she now lived with her grandmother, Maya Vasquez watched the news feeds with quiet eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. They got the bad people. Maya, her grandmother said, holding her close. The ones who hurt your mama, will they bring her back? Maya asked, and her voice was so small, so hopeful, so heartbreaking. No. Sweetheart, her grandmother whispered. But they made sure it will never happen again. Your mama saved you, and now the whole world has saved everyone else. Maya nodded slowly, and she clutched the photograph of her mother that she carried everywhere. Mama was brave, she said. Yes, she was, her grandmother agreed. The bravest person any of us ever knew. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the ashes of the Vreth fleet drifted silently through the void, a monument to the price of underestimating humanity's love for its children. 1 year had passed since the war, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Vreth soldiers stood trial before a Concord tribunal, and the proceedings were broadcast to every corner of known space, watched by trillions of beings who wanted to see what human justice looked like. It was not the spectacle of vengeance that many had expected. There were no public executions, no torture, no humiliation beyond what the evidence itself provided. And the defendants were given every opportunity to explain their actions and mount their defense. In the end, they were convicted of crimes against sentient beings and sentenced to life imprisonment on a neutral rehabilitation station, where they would spend the rest of their days learning about the species they had wronged. Some called it too lenient, but Secretary General Okonkwo was unmoved. Justice is not about making the guilty suffer, she said in her address to the Concord. It is about acknowledging the truth and ensuring that it never happens again. We want the galaxy to fear harming our children, not to fear humanity itself. The Vreth Dominion paid a heavier price. Stripped of their seat on the Concord Security Council, their military placed under international oversight, their government restructured to include representation from species they had once considered beneath their notice. It was not destruction, it was reformation. And it was perhaps more terrifying because it showed that humanity did not simply want to defeat its enemies, but to change them, and change was everywhere. Humanity was no longer classified as a minor species in Concord records, for such a designation had become almost laughably inappropriate, given what the Black Fleet had demonstrated 17 species had formally requested. alliance treaties with Earth within 6 months of the war's end. And the Terran Assembly found itself in the unfamiliar position of being courted rather than dismissed. They are afraid of us now. Admiral Array observed at one of the endless diplomatic receptions that had become a feature of post-war life. Good. Secretary General Okonkwo replied, "Fear is not ideal, but it is better than contempt, and in time, fear can become respect." But the real changes were happening far from the corridors of power, in places where ordinary people lived and loved and remembered on New Eden. The colony had been rebuilt stronger than before, with defensive systems that would make any future raid impossible. And at the center of the new town square stood a monument that drew visitors from across the galaxy. It was a statue carved from white stone imported from the mountains of Earth, and it depicted a woman shielding a child with her own body, Elena Vasquez, frozen forever in the moment of her greatest sacrifice. Her arms wrapped around the daughter she had died to protect, Maya visited the statue every week, bringing flowers that she grew in her own garden. And she would sit at its base and talk to her mother about school and friends and all the small things that made up a child's life. "I got an A on my science test," she told the statue on a bright autumn afternoon. Her 8th birthday, just a few days away. Mrs. Chun says, "I have a gift for xenobiology." "Just like you did." She placed her flowers at the statue's feet and smiled up at her mother's stone face. "I miss you, Mama, but Grandma says you would be proud of me." And I think she is right. I am trying to be brave like you were. Behind her, she heard footsteps, and she turned to see a crowd gathering in the square. Larger than usual, today was a special day, the first anniversary of the war's end. And people had come from all over the colony to pay their respects. But Maya noticed something different about this crowd. There were aliens among them, beings from species she had only seen in pictures and videos, walking alongside humans with a solemnity that transcended language and biology, an insectoid figure that she recognized as Arbiter Sylvine approached the statue and placed what might have been a flower from their homeworld at its base, bowing in a gesture of respect that their species reserved for only the most honored dead. "Your mother changed the galaxy, young one," Sylvine said, their translator rendering the words in a gentle tone. "She showed us all what love truly means," Maya nodded. Not trusting herself to speak, more aliens came forward, representatives of species that had once looked down on humanity as children, now paying tribute to a woman who had proven that there was nothing childish about human devotion. And then Maya saw something that made her heart skip. A Wraithchild was walking toward the statue, accompanied by 2 adult Wraith who looked nervous and uncertain, as if they were not sure whether they would be welcome. The crowd parted for them, watching in silence. And Maya could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. The Wraithchild was small, not much older than Maya herself, and in their clawed hands they carried a flower unlike any Maya had seen, a delicate thing with petals that shimmered in colors that had no names in human language. They stopped in front of Maya, and for a long moment neither child spoke. Then the Wraithchild extended the flower toward Maya, their eyes uncertain but determined. And Maya understood what was being offered. Not an apology, no flower could apologize for what had been done, but an acknowledgement. A hope that the future could be different from the past. Maya reached out and took the flower. She did not speak, and the Wraithchild did not speak. But something passed between them that was more profound than any words could express. 2 children, from species that had been at war, standing together beneath the statue of a mother who had given everything for love. Behind them, the crowd watched in silence, and more than a few had tears streaming down their faces. Arbiter Sylvine turned to Secretary General Okonkwo, who had traveled from Earth for this ceremony, and spoke in a voice meant only for her. "How did we misjudge you so completely?" they asked. "We saw a young species, fragile and short-lived, And we assumed that meant you were weak. How did we miss what was right in front of us? Okonkwo watched Maya and the Wrathchild stand together. And she smiled. You measured us by the wrong things, she said. You looked at our lifespan and saw brevity, at our territory and saw smallness, at our fleet and saw weakness. You never thought to measure us by what we protect. And what is that? Each other, Okonkwo replied. Humanity is not remarkable because we conquer. We are remarkable because we endure. And we endure because we will burn down the stars themselves to keep our children safe. Sylvine was silent for a moment, processing this. And now? They asked. Now that the galaxy knows what you truly are, what comes next? Peace, if we can have it, Okonkwo said. We did not want this war. Arbiter, we never wanted to show the galaxy what we were capable of. But we will not apologize for protecting our own. She turned to face the ancient being directly. Let this be the lesson that rings through history. Humanity can be the best friend the galaxy has ever known, or the worst enemy it has ever faced. The choice has always been yours. Sylvine nodded slowly, and there was something that might have been respect in their compound eyes. I believe the galaxy has made its choice, Secretary General, and I do not think anyone will make the Vreth's mistake again. In the square, Maya and the Wrathchild had sat down together at the base of the statue. Looking up at Elena's stone face, they still did not speak, for they did not share a language. But they sat in companionable silence as the sun set over New Eden, painting the sky in colors that reminded Maya of Earth. Two children, born into conflict but choosing peace. Two species, learning that the universe was big enough for both of them and above them. The statue of a mother who had given everything, standing eternal guard over the world she had died to protect. The galaxy had learned a new equation that year, written in fire and sealed in sacrifice. Humanity was not weak because they loved. They were unstoppable because of it. And in the cold arithmetic of the cosmos, that changed everything.